Good afternoon. Let me say a few things at the top, and then I will turn to your questions. You just heard directly from the President regarding the context, the current situation, and what the United States is seeking to do in the coming hours and the coming days. Let me offer just a few additional details from the Department of State. The safety and security of U.S. government employees and U.S. citizens overseas is our top priority. All remaining U.S. direct hire embassy personnel, including the ambassador, have relocated to Hamid Karzai International Airport, where they are secure. The Department of Defense is working to restore a safe and secure environment so that military and commercial flights can resume. Now, of course, the situation is evolving quickly, and we will communicate information to U.S. citizens as rapidly as possible. In the meantime, we are asking U.S. citizens to shelter and not to travel to the airport until they hear otherwise from the Department of State. We also continue to pursue all options to relocate interested and qualified Afghan SIV applicants and their immediate families, as well as other vulnerable Afghans. We remain closely coordinated with our international partners on the ground and around the globe. We've been engaging tirelessly with our partners in the international community. You may have seen last night, the United States organized a joint statement with 98 signatories calling on all parties to respect and facilitate the safe and orderly departure of foreign nationals and Afghans who wish to leave the country. Today, Secretary Blinken spoke with Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov, PRC State Counselor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi, Pakistan Foreign Minister Qureshi, UK Foreign Secretary Raab, NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg, Turkish Foreign Minister Çavuşoğlu, and EU High Representative Josep Borrell. Yesterday, he spoke with Australian Foreign Minister Payne, French Foreign Minister Le Drian, German Foreign Minister Maas, and Norwegian Foreign Minister Søreide. Other senior officials have been making calls to their counterparts as well around the clock. Additionally, the UN Security Council issued a joint press statement earlier today calling for a new government that is united, inclusive, and representative, including with the full and meaningful participation of women. The Council spoke with one voice to underscore that Afghanistan must abide by its international obligations, including to international humanitarian law, and ensure the safety and security of all Afghans and international citizens. The situation will continue to remain fluid in the coming hours and likely in the coming days. Nevertheless, we are operating on multiple fronts and around the clock to protect our people, those who have worked side by side with the United States over the years, and other vulnerable Afghans. Now, before I take your questions, I do want to speak to one additional issue that is of great importance to us, and that is the U.S. response to the earthquake in Haiti. The United States is closely monitoring the situation following a magnitude 7.2 earthquake that struck the southwestern part of the country on August 14th. We offer our deepest condolences to all who suffered the loss of loved ones or saw their homes or businesses destroyed. We are in close contact with Haitian authorities to respond to the earthquake and any requests for assistance. On Saturday, USAID deployed a Disaster Assistance Response Team, or a DART, to lead the U.S. government's humanitarian response efforts. And yesterday, at the request of the government of Haiti, USAID deployed members of Fairfax County Fire Department's Urban Search and Rescue, USAR, a team to join the DART. So far, the DART conducted an aerial assessment and is continuing to assess the damage. They will also identify priority needs and coordinate with the government of Haiti and humanitarian partners. U.S. Coast Guard air crews are transporting medical personnel and supplies from Port-au-Prince to Jérémie and Le Cay, and are evacuating injured citizens to higher level of care facilities in Port-au-Prince. At the request of USAID, Southcom is sending 2 UH-60 and 2 CH-47 helicopters from Joint Task Force Bravo to provide critical airlift support to ongoing relief efforts. We are also closely tracking Tropical Storm Grace, which is expected to reach Haiti today, potentially exposing people to further devastation. The United States remains a close and enduring friend to the people of Haiti, and we will continue to provide assistance in the aftermath of this tragedy. We are committed to helping the Haitian people build a better future. With that, I'm happy to take your questions.
Thanks. Can I ask two real quick logistical ones, and I really hope they'll be real quick. One, other than the threat, I guess you could call it, to respond militarily if the Taliban interfere or get in the way of any of the evacuation efforts. Is there any kind of agreement that's been reached, or any kind of an arrangement that has been reached with them about the presence of the U.S. military at the airport, or are they just basically there at kind of the pleasure of the Taliban, as it were, until they decide that they've had enough and they start, I don't know if they will or not, but whether they start to resist the fact that the airport is not under their control?
Well, let me take the opportunity to offer a bit of context on our diplomatic efforts over the past 72 or so hours. Ambassador Khalilzad and his team remained in Doha. They still remain in Doha, following consultations that we talked about last week with a number of countries from the region, the UN, and countries much farther afield. They continued, and they still continue, to engage with the Taliban. They continue to engage with the Islamic Republic, that is to say the government of Afghanistan representatives. When it became clear that the government of Afghanistan was on the verge of collapse, that President Ghani had fled, and that the Taliban were encroaching on Kabul, the focus, of course, changed. It shifted from supporting peace negotiations along with the international community to working assiduously and urgently to do all we can with the international community on an urgent basis to avert violence, to attempt to maintain order in Kabul, and very, very importantly, to guarantee that the Taliban would not seek to threaten our people or our operations. It was a very fluid situation. The situation changed markedly when President Ghani left the country and as the Taliban continued to encroach on Kabul. We do continue to engage with Taliban representatives in Doha from the State Department team. The U.S. military has spoken to engagement with the Taliban on the ground in Kabul. And again, we are working on a couple different fronts. First and foremost, to seek to preserve calm in Kabul, to maintain a semblance of security, and very importantly, to underscore that any effort, any attempt to target, to threaten, to intimidate our personnel or our operations would be met with a swift and decisive response.
Other than that, there's no agreement with the Taliban for the U.S. military to run the airport, to run the airspace, to be in control. And if there is an agreement, how long does that agreement last?
We have engaged with the Taliban. We have had discussions. I would say that some of those discussions have been constructive, but again, when it comes to the Taliban, we are going to look for their actions rather than listen to their words.
And then secondly, the logistical thing is on the embassy compound itself, which is now abandoned. Do you have you taken any measures to secure that place, or are you just basically letting is there a protecting power? Is it open area that anyone can get into now if they can get over the fence? Are you prepared to leave it just sit there?
Well, as you know, Matt, we confirmed last night that as of late night Eastern, all of our civilian personnel located at the embassy, chief of mission, those operating under chief of mission authority, had safely relocated from the embassy compound to Hamid Karzai International Airport. As you also know, the embassy is in an area that has been heavily fortified. So we do not have an American presence on the ground.
Is there any presence?
We do not have an American presence on the ground at the embassy. Our ambassador is and has been at the embassy at the compound, the Hamid Karzai International Airport, since late last night, our time, and that remains the case.
Yeah, but there isn't any protecting power. There's nobody there. It's wide open for anyone who wants to go in there.
As you know,
regardless of whether it's in a built-up barricaded area or not, you basically just took off and left it. empty.
As you know, it is a heavily fortified area. And
My last one is that in the Doha agreement, which the president mentioned several times as having kind of tied his hands, there are 16 times in that agreement where it refers to the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, which is not recognized by the United States as a state and is known as the Taliban. 16 times it mentions that. And you've said before that you will not recognize any government or assist any government that comes to power by force. Since the Taliban basically walked in to Kabul and the president fled, are you in a position to say whether or not you might be willing to recognize a government that emerges from this, aside from the UN calls?
Well, this is something that we have spoken to before. We have spoken to it before events of recent hours and recent days. Secretary Blinken spoke to this yesterday morning. We are still taking stock of what has transpired over the past 72 hours and the diplomatic and the political implications of that. We are, as you have seen in any number of venues, we are coordinating closely with Afghanistan's neighbors. As we've said, the secretary, other senior officials in this building, our ambassadors in their respective capitals around the world have engaged governments in the region and much farther afield on an aligned approach to the evolving situation. And you've already started to see some of the fruits of that. I think most notably, and I mentioned this at the outset, you saw the statement that emanated from the UN Security Council. Obviously, the UN Security Council has a permanent set of members, several of whom are among our closest allies in the world, and a couple countries where our interests are rarely aligned. Nevertheless, this document, it is quite strong. It is quite clear. I think it is reflective of the broad consensus that has emerged from the international community about not only our thinking, what the United States may or may not do going forward as we assess ultimately what has come to pass, but what the international community will do. This statement says that the sustainable end to the conflict can only be achieved through an inclusive, just, durable, and realistic political settlement that upholds human rights, including for women, children, and minorities. The Security Council, speaking with one voice, which, as you know, is not always an easy feat, called on all parties to adhere to international norms and standards on human rights, and to call for an immediate cease to any abuses in that regard. Ultimately, when it comes to our posture towards any future government in Afghanistan, it will depend upon the actions of that government. It will depend upon the actions of the Taliban.